So, hello, global people. Today is May 12th, 2020, and this is the webinar on doing business with Korea, or shall I say South Korea. And this is co-presented by Tomomi Kumai in, where are you today, Tomomi? In Seoul? Tomomi is in Seoul, and she will have to put herself off mute so we can actually hear her. Tomomi, put yourself off mute for her.
I'm sorry. Yes, South Korea, outside of Seoul.
Outside of Seoul. All right. So this is co-presented today by Tomomi and the Culture Mastery, which is, in this case, me. And today we will cover, I think, a timely topic, at least for those of you who live in a part of the world where you're doing a lot of business with Korea. And it has been on my plate for quite a long time. I live in the United States, and this is where our offices are. We're in the southeastern quadrant of the United States, where there has been traditionally a lot of business influence from Korea. I live in the city of Atlanta and the greater Atlanta area and the state of Georgia, but also other regions of the United States, especially in the southeast, have seen over the years a large piece of immigration coming from Korea, and huge foreign direct investment projects, mainly automotive, but also other areas of industry and production and manufacturing that are creating jobs, that are creating value, that are creating products outside of Korea for people who are not Korean. So Korea is one of the top industry or top countries for global industry. It is a big player on the global market, and I am so thrilled to have Tomomi Kumai join me today to walk you through the special character of Korean business culture, which does not always explain itself to, at least to us Westerners who may be familiar with a little bit of Japanese culture here, a little bit of Chinese culture there, and maybe some Singapore and India sprinkled in. And for many of us, and of course I'm projecting, Korea is somewhat of a terra incognita, a land that is still quite a bit foreign to us. So before I let Tomomi introduce herself, I'm just going to walk you through the baseline of what we typically do on our webinars. And those of you who have been to our webinars before, you may remember seeing some of these slides. And that is perfectly okay, because I want to drive this point home, that when you leave your native culture to work with another culture, you will by default happen upon behaviors, happen upon people who do things in a different way. They do things that are not quote unquote normal to you. And it is important for us to make ourselves aware of the fact that our way of doing things, our native culture way of doing things, is not the universal standard. And it takes a constant reminder. It's been a constant practice for me over decades now, dating myself, to remind myself that just because it's normal to me doesn't make it normal outside of my native world. So what are we going to do today? The goals for today is identify the big cultural value blocks of Korea. We want to understand how these values impact communication styles, relationship building, teamwork, leadership, working together, living with each other. We also want to develop an understanding of how these cultural values impact our business practices and how we show up at work with each other. And we're going to talk about some tools and strategies, how you can improve how you work with people from South Korea, and we'll show you some, at least we'll show you an idea that Tomomi and I have, how you can deepen your understanding of Korean culture. Because if you don't get it, culture will bite you in the butt. And you've heard me say that this has been my tagline. So if you've been to it says it here on the banner behind me, it says it on our website, on our social media. This has been my mantra to the people that we work with. Folks, you got to get culture, because eventually it will get you, and it will be costly. So I'm here, Tomomi and I are here to help you prevent that from happening in the worst way. And just because you work in a global organization does not mean that your company needs to be global. It's the people inside the company that make the company global. It's the people who work for the organization who need to be culture ready. In this case, that could mean you, or maybe somebody in your organization that you know and that you have responsibility for. So just because you work for a global player with a footprint across the world, that doesn't make your company global. It's you and your teammates. If they're culture ready, then your company is global. And just because, and I talked about the normal not being normal universally, I want to drive this home as well. You may have seen me or others use this quote by famous Anais Nin. It's the world that we perceive, not the world that actually is. So we perceive, every one of us perceives the world through our own lens, through our own filters, and we have our limitations in how we perceive our world. And the more we become aware of that, the closer we get to the next step, which is building cultural competence, building the knowledge, the empathy, the cultural intelligence, and the emotional intelligence to utilize culture in a way that's beneficial for us. Just before I came on this webinar, on my news feed was a headline in Forbes magazine, and it said the biggest soft skill of them all, still the biggest soft skill. And you forgive me because I go on a pedestal when I hear the word soft skill. I go like, it is not a soft skill. Without the soft skill, your hard skills are worthless. So, and but they say, the Forbes magazine says the top soft skill is empathy, having the ability to understand and feel somebody else's perspective, somebody else's point of view in order to better relate to them. I agree. Now, how can you do that across cultures? Unless you understand the culture that you're dealing with, it will be very hard to have the same level of empathy that you might have with people from your own world. And we need to be aware that we think we know a lot about the other culture, when in fact there's a large piece of information that we may be missing or may not be even aware that we don't have it yet. So with that, I would like to bring up Tomomi, who is joining us from Korea here today. And she is, between Tomomi and I are 13 hours of time difference. So first of all, I want to say thank you, Tomomi, for being on this late of your day, and thank everybody else on this webinar who's dialed in from across the world. Tomomi, we have people from India, from Hong Kong, from Denmark, from Great Britain, from Scotland, from Belgium, from Estonia, wow, India, Germany, all over the world. This is amazing. Tomomi, tell our audience, tell our webinar participants, what makes you the expert of Korean culture.
Thank you so much for introducing me, and thank you everyone for coming to this webinar. And yeah, many people look at my name and okay, so her name is Tomomi. Okay, so this Japanese person is talking about Korea. Why? And so let me explain. So my name is Tomomi Kumai. It's fully Japanese name. And my background is I'm a Korean Japanese. My grandfather on my father's side is the only Japanese person, and he got married to a Korean person during the colonial era. So my grandfather had a business in colonial era Korea to have a restaurant for Japanese soldiers, and he got married with Korean person. And after the war, which ended with the atomic bombs, which was dropped in my hometown Hiroshima, they decided to go to Hiroshima. And my mom, who is 100% Korean, she was born in southern part of South Korea, and again during colonial period. And back then, Korean citizens were considered as Japanese citizens, you know, because they were forced to have Japanese names and they had to speak Japanese. But at the same time, it means that going back and forth between in Japan happened frequently. And my mother's family was one of those people who voluntarily decided to go to Japan for better job opportunity. So they went to Hiroshima. And so my mom and dad are, how do you call, like not first generation, but 1.5 generation.
Yeah.
So, or what do you say, zero point 0.5 generation? So they understand Korean language and they grew up, in Korean culture also. But um, it wasn't back then. The discrimination was really a lot. So they needed to
Mm,
pass as Japanese. So their main language
mm,
was Japanese, but for them, they could understand. And when uh, I grew up as a Japanese monolingual at first, but the
mhm,
culture at home, what we eat or how we behave, I learned that it was different from my friend's house. So
mhm,
then that was the first experience for me of culture shock
mhm,
about my own
mhm.
culture. Wow, I thought I was Japanese,
Oh,
but I'm not. So those are the elements
so
I'm
you
gonna explain later
so
too.
you so you grew up as a kid thinking you're Japanese like everybody else until you became aware, until your cognitive skills made you realize, well, I might be Japanese at first, but my family isn't really, and they've been hiding this from me until now.
Right?
And at what age did you begin to embrace your Koreanness?
I was weird child from the
Oh, I was
very
too. That's all right.
so because usually Koreans in Japan, they want to, because it's really hard to live as a Korean in Japan back then,
Hmm.
before Korean Wave and everything. So a lot of people wanted to pass as Japanese. And I was the one who always said, "Oh, my mom is Korean, and I eat kimchi, and I brought kimchi to school when we had, like lunchbox day."
Hmm.
And I was always, since elementary school, telling people that I'm different, that I'm Korean. And one friend who is 100% Korean came to me and say, she has Japanese name too, but she told me, "Hey, Tomomi, I'm only telling you, but I'm Korean too." And I remember asking my mom, like, why does she have to hide this? How
Hmm.
come she can't say I'm Korean? And my mom said, "You, Tomomi, have Japanese name and Japanese citizenship. So that experience is different from her, who
Hmm.
doesn't have Japanese citizenship." So from early on, I was able to see from both sides, from a Japanese perspective or minority Korean in Japan.
Hmm.
Then I went to, I got 9 years of education from the States. 1 year in high school, I was in Hawaii, 4 years to get my bachelor's degree in linguistics in San Diego, and 4 years for my graduate study in Illinois. And when I first went to San Diego, that was when I met I don't know if I say real, but Korean people from South Korea, not
Hmm.
Korean Americans, but they told me, "Okay, Tomomi, you look Japanese. I mean, you look Korean face."
Hmm.
And I say, "Yeah, I have 75% Korean heritage." And they say, "Why
Hmm.
don't you study Korean? Shame on you." So I said,
Oh.
that makes sense.
Hmm.
So I studied. I wanted to learn heritage language, heritage culture more. And
Hmm.
I went to Korea to study the language. And I also um, married with my first marriage was with Korean husband for 12 years.
So
And
and you
I now live
currently
in Korea.
you live in Korea. How long have you lived in Korea?
Living. This is, I lived 6 years.
Okay. So
But before that, I was going back and forth
you made
between
a
US,
conscious
Japan.
adult choice to not live in Japan any longer and live in the country of your heritage culture. That's
Hmm.
a bold statement. So you truly embrace your family's Korean roots then.
Yes,
Nice,
yes.
nice.
I really love living in Korea, and I am really thankful that I can share my heritage, what I
Hmm.
learned, both as a Korean person, but not really Korean person, from different perspective
Right.
and from Western perspective also. So thank you
W-
so much for giving me this opportunity.
Well, thank you for being on here. We had one person as we announced this webinar on social media, and through emails and whatnot. There was one person who immediately commented on our post and said, "Oh, it'll be interesting to hear a Japanese talk about Korea." And I was like, "Oops!" Did and that person by name, I know the person who commented, and that person is Korean. And I was afraid that, or not afraid, but I was like, we need to address this, because maybe
Mhm.
a Korean might not be too keen on having a quote unquote Japanese talk about Korean culture. So I'm happy to have you explain the your background that makes it, I hope, understandable for those of you who are on here who are born and raised in Korea, that it and anyone on this webinar, it often takes an outsider or a semi-outsider to see the peculiarities of a culture, because we have a different perspective. I can see US culture from a completely different angle because I did not grow up in the US, and I think I have a very intimate understanding of United States culture and other cultures for that matter, because I am not born into it, and I've had to um, study it and understand it for myself in order to manage to live in that culture. And I think Tomomi and I, we share this experience. So we would like to hear from you folks. We have 43 attendees in the room. This is quite a full room. Thank you all for being here. So you see the slides. I'd like to hear from you in the chat box. Have you worked with people from Korea, and how comfortable are you when you do that? And what are some of the things you would like to walk away from this webinar? Just type it in the chat box. Could be one word, could be a full phrase, and you can type this in along the webinar. We will come back to it towards the end, but I want to hear, or we want to hear from you. What is your current experience with Korea? What may be some of the challenges you've experienced, or some of the things you can't explain for yourselves yet? So that's what the chat box is for. We have also one person typed a question into the Q&A box. That will work as well. And we will address that question later on. Thank you,
Mhm.
anonymous attendee. And so chat box or Q&A, I'd rather you use the chat box, but Q&A is perfectly fine. And we will address some of these questions as we move along. Now, I want you to understand that when we talk about different cultures, it is important to know that culture is not a monolithic thing. There is no such thing as the Korean, the Japanese, the German. There are multifaceted individuals in every culture, and regions of a culture matter. It matters whether you grow up in Seoul or on Jeju Island. It matters whether you grow up in New York City or in Atlanta or in the rural mountainous areas of the country. And there are things that you will notice about cultures because they stand out to you, that you can experience them with your five senses, with your sense of sight, with your sense of hearing, with your sense of smell or taste or touch. So you can taste kimchi and it will tell you something about Korean cuisine. Or you can what's another good staple of Korean cuisine, Tomomi? What are the sandwiches? Dang it! Now I can't.
Sandwiches?
The pork sandwich. I forget it. Um,
Uh, Pork sandwich? You mean samgyeopsal, the pork belly meat?
maybe that. What is it? Yeah.
Pork
So
spam?
yes.
Spam?
Maybe, but we can taste that, we can see that, we can smell it, we can see how people in Korea dress, we can hear K-pop music, and we can deduct our idea of what the culture is like. So these are the things that our five senses are picking up, and this is what you see here floating above the water surface. And then underneath the water surface are the things of a culture that we cannot easily pick up with our five senses. These are the values, the belief systems, how people think, how they feel, how they model their world, what the mental image, what their personal mental image of the world that they live in is like. And that's what it takes to be empathetic, to know what's going on, or at least in parts to know what's going on in somebody else's mind. And this is the hardest part. So There's the above the water surface part. That's the do's and don'ts. You can memorize them. You can download an app. You can study the book and carry it with you. And then there's the underneath the water surface part, the whys that float up these do's and don'ts that create the do or do not. And there are a few methods we can use to measure that. Tomomi and I are introducing two to you here today. We extensively work with a tool called Globesmart Profile, which allows us to measure culture along 5 different dimensions. And I compared Korea to 2 other East Asian cultures here on this grid, and also included a European culture, mine, and the one that I live in, the US, and I also included South American culture, Brazil. So we'll walk through this real quick, but I want to address some of the comments in the chat box first, Tomomi. So Sabine Beerlocher, that sounds like or looks like a Germanic name. She says she expatriates coming to Europe, Europeans going there. So Sabine is dealing with expatriates and students from Korea coming to Europe. Interesting. Matthew Hill from the UK. Hey, Matthew. He says he would like to learn about office peer-to-peer behaviors and the Korean management style. Excellent. That goes along with a question we had in the Q&A box. Somebody asked, if you have a team member with both Korean and Western members, what do you think are the 3 or 4 most important things you can do to facilitate their working together and be productive? That's a very excellent question, and also one that I think requires a longer answer. Lori commented that she has noticed that Korean people can be very emotional during the conversation. How can you tell by the tone of the voice if they're not angry at you? Well, Tomomi, you want to take that one real quick?
Sometimes I think Korean language can sound like they're angry because we have what is it? Aspirated sounds, like consonants like a K, T, or P. They pronounce like K. And so a lot of times in older generation, they kind of speak loud. So I have experienced that my Western friend, we got on taxi, and taxi drivers were just excited that he can show us around, and he was just talking normally. So I didn't take it, as he was angry or anything, but my foreign friends, so why is he angry? Oh, I said, no, he's excited, and probably these, and then when they want to emphasize, they go like, or that kind of sound. So that can be misunderstood as being angry. So if you hear the sound, then maybe it's just the sound that's making like they're angry.
Yes.
But
and
especially older generation, a lot of it's not.
Laurie, I hope this answers your question, because as a German native speaker, I get the same comments from non-German speakers, or the same is true for Russians or any Slavic speakers. Even Arabic and Hebrew, to the uninitiated ear, sometimes sound very aggressive or angry, because we have a communication style that is a bit, well, it sounds as if we were aggressive, but we're not. It's just the language, the tone of voice that our languages create sometimes lead us to believe that. Thanks for that, Tomomi. Then we have David from the state of Georgia, where I am in. He says, we have a strong Korean automotive industry here in Georgia. Yes, Kia. And just recently, there's a Korean car battery manufacturer who's investing in Georgia, SK Technologies, I believe, that he would like to bring out of this session a better understanding of how to conversationally interact most effectively, etiquette and manners. Yes, we will address that, David. Sabine raised her hand, and she's alerting us that she's not German, but Swiss. I didn't say you were German. I only said the name sounds Germanic. And Sabine raised her hand. Maybe she can put her question in the chat box. We'll give you the mic maybe later. Wow, there's a lot of questions. So I'll circle back to some of these questions later, folks. So let Tomomi and I continue with the slide deck real quick, and we'll make sure to come back to your questions later. I love this. You are very interactive. Yay. All right. So Globesmart profile, let's go back to the slide. You see 5 different dimensions here. You see independent or interdependent. That will tell you about the general trends in one nation culture. As we said earlier, there is no such thing as the Korean, but there's a general behavioral trend that we can find in every culture, even in the most popular cultures of the world, like China, where we have, I don't know, 1.3, 1.4 billion people, yet there is a general behavioral trend. Sure, there will be differences between the wheat growing parts of China and the rice growing parts of China, and more urban settings and less urban settings, sure. However, there's a general trend that we can see in all nation cultures that we can use at least as a starting point to compare cultures before we drill into the deeper nuances, right? And you see here 5 dimensions by which Globesmart measures this. Independent meaning that we are more individualistic, interdependent meaning we're more group oriented. And you can see here the Asian cultures on this comparison grid lean heavily on the group orientation. That means well, Tomomi, what does group orientation mean for a Korean?
It means that we appreciate the harmony more, rather than just me as an individual, but where I am in the position of the group is important. And group here in Korea has hierarchy also. So how high are you in that group means a lot. And if you speak up, usually in the business context, if it's a meeting, anything, people usually say what they're expected to say, what they're supposed to say in that role, rather than me as a just individual. So compared to maybe American way of communicating, okay, let's brainstorm. What do you think? Then what happens usually is people kind of start looking at, first look at the boss. What does my boss want me to say? And look at older people and, okay, what do they think is the right answer here? And so that's what it means. You don't want to disrupt the harmony, what the group wants to do. So you kind of be humble and you don't necessarily say everything you're thinking.
And you already brought in the second dimension here. You brought in the hierarchical nature of Korean society. So this is what the second horizontal line expresses: egalitarianism versus status. So the more status oriented a culture is, the steeper the hierarchical pyramids, if you will, are. So where do we find hierarchy in Korean society? Only at work or also in social life?
It's everything is hierarchical because relationship is important. And as a group, if you are communicating with someone, personally, I just make this percentage up, but you can think 98% of the communication you're going to have in a Korean society, you always have to think, okay, who's higher or who's lower? And not only the position at work, but even the same cohort, same group in the group at the company, there is another layer of a hierarchy of which school did they graduate from, or what age. Age is the default hierarchy. If you are 1 year older, then this lower person has to call you in certain way. So 1 year difference makes a difference in Korean hierarchy.
That reminds me of watching the movie Parasite. Those of you who haven't watched the movie yet, please do yourselves a favor, find it online. It's streaming, and if you have to pay for it, go pay for it. That movie is the first non-US movie winning the Best Picture Oscar ever in 90-something years of Oscar history. Big deal. I don't know why it took so long, but still a big deal. The movie is great. And there is one element of the story about these two 20-something boys or young men who talk about which school to attend and how that would matter, and how having the right degree from the right school would open doors for job opportunities or just for social status, right? So that it what you just described is beautifully depicted in that movie as well. So as an outsider, as a long-nosed Westerner, if I am doing business with Koreans, how do I know this? How do I find out what's the best way for me to quickly decipher who is who in the group and who are the people that I should be talking to instead of not talk to? Is there a way?
Yes, the most important thing is, first of all, you need to have a relationship with each person and try to ask about their background or get to know their family or anything. So try to get the information.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way. Collect the information. So you have to be kind of ethnographer at the beginning. A lot of times what it happens in Korea or it happens in Japan too, but what we think is like, okay, expats people, they come from the headquarter. Okay, they mention, okay, this is not working. This is the issue. Let's fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And we feel like, wow, they're here to tell us we're all wrong. So I know you have really, tight scheduling and everything, but at the beginning, ethnographer mode, and try to see who is showing body language of politeness or respect to the other person, who is nodding more, who's doing the listening more, who's
Mm-hmm.
doing the talking more, or who's talking louder. And then you will see the hierarchy. But by talking to people personally, one-on-one, then you will get more ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So first I recommend doing that, and organizational chart,
Oh,
because role and responsibilities.
so can you ask for that? Would a company openly share their organizational tree?
Uh, I yeah, if you, I was just thinking about as an expat
Mm-hmm.
person,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Okay,
but
if I'm
then
part of the organization. Okay.
yeah, but another way is, get the business card, because in Korean culture, business card is very important, and what the title says
Mm-hmm.
is important, and you can ask, and then looking at the email and trying to figure out who is who. And so that is very important. So from Koreans perspective, working with Americans, especially like IT or more flat structure, a lot of times there are people who doesn't really have any, direct reports, but working with some groups, then that's really difficult for Korean people to figure out, okay, so is he my boss or is he not? And how am I supposed to? So sometimes if your organization has really flat structure, it's important to clarify this person's role and position to the Korean people so that they know who to go to and who to ask. Because Korean people prefer communicating through the right channel. It has to go through the hierarchy and
Mm-hmm.
come down. But what I hear from a lot of expats people is, Western flat culture people want to just talk directly
Yeah,
to these people who are actually doing the job.
and that would
And
be
they
a
don't
bad idea.
answer very well because they feel they are not respecting their boss.
Right,
So they feel they're losing boss's face, which
right.
is in the end losing their own face. So they prefer Western people to go through the channel. But from this very
Mm-hmm.
task oriented culture, it takes time. And how come I cannot talk directly?
Mm-hmm.
But for Korean people, it's important. So if you can get organizational chart, or if you cannot, try to figure out who is where in the hierarchy and communicate. And on this end too, try to clarify who is where and
Mm-hmm.
how the communication should be done to Korean people.
So I heard you say a few things, and there was a veiled um, complaint about Westerners, which you did very harmoniously. I like that, Tomomi. But since I'm the Westerner, I can pick that up and throw it back in us Westerners' faces and say, we are being overbearing, we're being too loud and too aggressive in our approach. So I think what we need to do is as we work with Koreans or other Asian cultures, to shut up for a while, listen, observe, build relationships, and have the patience to building out these relationships in order to get a better understanding of who is who and who are they in relation to each other. So you said that in a much more harmonious way than I could, but that's me, the Westerner. And there's a lot of
Thank you.
Westerners on this webinar, so I need to make sure my Westerners understand what this means. Um,
Yes, thank you.
so we have a Gary or Jerry Higgins here. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, sir. Jerry says that he has lived and worked in Korea in Ulsan some 25 years ago, and that he's been connected with Korea more or less throughout his working life. And he's wondering if and how the culture changed since then in the last, let's say, 20, 30 years. Can you speak to that, Tomomi? Have you seen Korean culture evolve in the last 3 decades?
Yes, I can say that Korea has become really, global, more global than ever. And, IT got very strong after the IMF shock back in the 90s because the
Mm-hmm.
Korea decided, okay, we're going to invest in IT. So Korea is very IT strong country and global in terms of um, like older generation might not had so much understanding of different cultures, but now younger generations are educated outside of US a lot. And in the States, number three biggest international students population is from South Korea. Number one is China.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you understand because of the population. Number two is India, of course, big population. But number three is South Korea. So
Mm-hmm.
South Korean people go out and get educated and come back. So a lot of westernization is happening, although we have traditional Korean values at the bottom still.
Mm-hmm.
And women's position is getting better. Of course, it's not as the gender gap is not as small as Western
Mm-hmm.
or European countries, but it used to be that Korea was always lower than Japan. And right now, I think it's out of 153, Korea is 108 or
Mm-hmm.
something. And this year, for the first time, Korea got higher
Mm-hmm.
than Japan. So smaller gender gap,
Which is
and
great.
which I think, yes, and Me Too movement in Korea was really big, and it
Interesting.
made a lot of, yes, effect in the society. So what it is Korean people had to go through historically, difficult history, Japanese colonization, and also even after they became independent, because of the military coups or a lot of uh, presidents with military power, they had to
Right.
fight
Right.
to get their true freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So I think compared to Japanese people, Korean people has kind of like a stronger sense of citizenship. We can make changes if we
Mm-hmm.
want to. So generally, we say union is strong in Korean companies.
Mm-hmm.
But just like how they impeached President uh, Park, the
Mm-hmm.
female president, they used the candle protests. So
Mm-hmm.
non-violent,
Mm-hmm.
no bloodshed, but they
Mm-hmm.
impeached the president. And Me Too movement is the same. Women feel that if they speak up and if they do it, they can change it.
Right.
So that although we still don't have, really good position in politics, government or corporate world, you don't see so much women at the higher end,
Mm-hmm.
but it is getting better.
Well, and
So
you did
I
have
think,
a female head of government, and I don't remember Japan having a female head of government yet, or China.
yeah, yeah.
So that speaks
Me
volumes,
Too
even though.
movement didn't happen in Japan, unfortunately.
And
Very
you said
sorry.
something I think that's really important. This may have, some of you may have only heard this in passing, so let me bring this out again. You said Korean South Korean society has westernized and modernized significantly in the last 20, 30 years. So we have you have a lot of Western orientation in, especially in the younger generations in Korea, paired, however, with traditional Korean values. And this should not be misunderstood by Westerners. Just because you enter Seoul or you enter the big metropolises of Korea and you interact with global companies from Korea does not mean that they're westernized in your sense of the word. There is this balance between global modernism and traditionalism in Korea, and finding yourself between those two poles is not always easy to navigate for
Right.
outsiders, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, because
So
it depends on each company, corporate culture too. So even if you're in the same industry, depending on which company you're working, then some company has more Western influenced culture and some have stronger traditional Korean values. So
right.
you really, again, need to examine each group, each culture to find out what their this unique culture in one organization or one group.
All right. Thanks for that, Tomomi. Let me finish
Mm.
the Globesmart profile for
Mhm.
y'all. So we talked about independence versus group orientation. We talked about egalitarianism versus hierarchy. Then we see here risk versus certainty. So risk meaning a society or a culture is okay with going into the unknown and um, just acting upon good faith and ideas and good concepts. And a certainty culture would like to, well, how would you describe the sense or the desire for certainty in the Korean world, Tomomi?
Yes, Korean people still, compared to maybe US or Germany here, when you compare with the Western world, maybe it seems like more, risk avoidance. They want certainty, but that's kind of like at the beginning something new. They're not
Mm-hmm.
sure, but if they are convinced with the data that's something they need, then they make decision, especially top down decision,
Mm-hmm.
then they want to do it
Data.
fast.
So
And
there needs to be
yeah,
proof
data,
first. So first we need to have proof. We need to
right,
remove uncertainty, and now we have data, and now we can move quickly. But before we can
right.
move quickly, we need to have a level of certainty, right?
Yes, and best practices. Korean people like to hear about best
Hmm.
practices, and if they think that's the way to do, there's a phrase in Korean cultures, "빨리 빨리." That means quick, quick. So Korean people's general tendency is they want to make things happen quick. So once they make decision, maybe from a German's perspective, it's not fully planned, but they just wanna implement and change at the same time. So there are going
Okay.
to be a lot of last minute changes also,
Hmm.
but uh, in that way, they are more risk taking. Once they make a decision, and if they know it's a good thing, so
Okay.
that shows the coronavirus situation. You know, based on the stars and Mars,
Hmm.
they know what to do for the pandemic situation. They were prepared, and they
Hmm.
know doing everything quick, testing everybody is a good thing. So
I think
they
Korea
make
has the
quick
highest
decision.
testing rate of all countries, right? You test like everybody.
Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm.
So that's the part where they know it's the good thing. Then it is a risk, right? Because just like Japan was doing, Japan had this Olympics related, so they didn't want to take the risk to prove that they had big number of infected people. So they made decision later, later, later. Let's
Hmm.
see and wait.
Hmm.
But Korea is like, no, we need to test and transparency. Tell everyone.
Which we don't see
And
in Japan right now. So that's completely different in Japan. Japan is still sending people back to the office regardless of the threat of infection. Korea didn't do that the same way. Right.
right.
Marco Hellemans is asking, is the he was asking, so the way to make decisions in Korea is quite similar to the Japanese way? Question mark. Would you agree to that, or
Um,
is it different?
if I compare Korean and Japan, Korean people make quicker decision and they are okay with, let's say, like 70% planning.
Mm-hmm.
But Japanese people prefers, they want to perfect the plan first.
Right. Right.
And they make plan B, plan C. What if?
Yeah.
What
Big,
if?
big, big
What if?
consensus.
And
Nimawashi consensus all the way up, right? Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So a lot of times Japanese people decision making takes really long time and sometimes no decision is made.
Mm.
And but Korean people, yeah, 70%, but let's go, let's do it. And as they go, if it's not working, okay, let's change it.
Okay, good. Excellent.
So
I hope that answers your
that's the
question, Marco.
difference.
The two last dimensions here is communication style, more direct or more indirect. We'll take a look at this on a separate slide real quick, and you see that Korea and most Asian cultures fall into the indirect high context communication style compared to most European or Western, Northern European and North American cultures tend to be much more direct in their communication styles. And then relationship is more relevant in working with each other than completing the task. So we recently did a webinar on Globesmart Profile and how to use it in more depth. Shoot me an email or put it in the chat box if you want to learn more about this. I'll send you a link to the recording of the Globesmart Profile webinar. It's only 30 minutes. That'll give you a deeper understanding of it. So I don't want to spend excessive time on that here. I also want you to look at a comparison grid that is from the book The Culture Map by Erin Meyer, an American professor teaching at INSEAD University in Paris, and she wrote the book The Culture Map. She's also using cultural comparison frameworks and mixing it up in a fairly novel way. And I like this particular graph that she has in her book because she's using two dimensions together to create a more rounded picture. So you see the horizontal axis is our communication style more confrontational or is it avoiding confrontation? And the vertical axis showing us, is it more emotionally expressive or do we keep our emotions under control and don't show them in our communication? And you see here, Korea and Japan fall into the quadrant of confrontation. Let's be careful how much I want to confront somebody and also make sure that I don't show my emotions too strong to the outside world. Would you agree with where Korea is on this grid, Tomomi?
In the hierarchical situation where you have to show respect, yes. But
Mm-hmm.
if you get really personal, get to know each other, and you feel comfortable with each other, Korean relationship is like this, really interdependent.
Mm-hmm.
So in this relationship, a lot of people show emotions. Korean people are really passionate,
Mm-hmm.
and they can show a lot of emotions compared to Japanese people. So if you're close, they're more emotionally
Right.
expressive.
So that gives you permission to show your emotion because you already have the societal connection, you have built a relationship that allows you to give the emotion. In a professional
Right,
world where you may not have that yet, you need to be careful how much emotion you can give. Right?
right. And if you're higher in the hierarchy, you can show more negative emotions like
Mm-hmm.
anger, like if you're your parents or boss
Mm-hmm.
or somewhere higher than. But if you're lower position, it's rude to show
Right.
that kind of negative emotions. So maybe you will see older generations yelling more
Mm-hmm.
here in Korea.
Yeah, and Brett Perry in Chicago says his closer Korean friends have no problem showing emotion. There you go. You apparently have built this. And
Yeah.
again, I have to bring this up. You got to watch Parasite. And if you've watched it before, watch it again after this webinar because some of the behaviors you see in that movie will now make a lot more sense than when you watched it the first time. So you'll see those exact behaviors. You see people emotionally restrained in communication with each other because there is a hierarchical disconnect. And then you see people being really loud and in their faces with each other because they share life experience. They have something, they have a relationship that goes beyond or allows them to do that. Excellent. Love it. Now, Tomomi put together a few slides for us to highlight some of the core Korean values that you or any people who work with Koreans should be aware of. So I'm just going to click the slides and Tomomi, you fill in the gaps.
Okay. Can I check with you how much time
Yeah,
I have?
we officially have 10 minutes, but I think we can go a little longer. And those of you who have to drop off at the full hour, rest assured you will get the recording. So should we go over?
Okay. So I will try to then speak faster. But first important thing we have to know is Confucianism. Confucianism itself came from China, but it was adopted in Korean society, and it was used for 500 years to rule the country. So it's still, it's not a religion, it's more philosophy, but in this modern Korea, it still becomes the base of Korean people's communication or relationship building. And what's important is we need to think about this five relationship that Confucianism teaches: ruler and subject, father and son, and uh, husband and wife, and older brother, younger brother, and friends. So these are the hierarchy. So in business context, company, CEO, and company and subordinates, the employees, and boss, subordinates, and um, in the same team, someone who's higher, like or older, or who's been working longer than you is still higher. And in company context, still it's sad, but it's still true partially that men and women. So what it means is if you are in a higher position, you have to provide, protect, take care. It's kind of like fatherly kind of love. And if you're in the lower position, then you need to show respect and be loyal. So that's why I say this friend here in Western concept is different, because in Korea, if you are 1 year older, that fits into this brother relationship already. So not really friend, although you're close. Still, you have to show respect, and older people maybe pay for lunch. And kind of it's related to etiquette, but when you go dining, usually older men pay for the group. And for the reciprocity, next older person say, okay, then I'll pay for the coffee. So when you are trying to build a relationship with Korean people, when going to lunch or dinner or coffee is very important, but please try to find out, okay, who's going to pay? Because Korean people usually don't like to go Dutch,
Quick
and you
question to
always have
me.
to.
Quick question from
Yeah.
Susan, who's asking, how do people know other people's age? Can you ask them outright? How would you find out?
Korean people usually ask at very early in the relationship, and
Okay,
they can ask you, how old are you, or what year were you born?
exactly.
And
Excellent.
and Korean people know, especially in the Western country, it's not really polite to ask, if they're a
Hmm.
global business person. So they won't ask, but they try to figure out by, what year you graduated from university
Right,
or things like that.
right.
And and then other Korean people try to figure out who's older, who's higher by how they speak, because Korean language has different levels of honorifics. And
Hmm.
if you're talking to somebody higher, even 1 year, then you need to use the honorific form. So by listening to other people, you can figure out, okay, so this person is using the polite form, but this
Hmm.
person is not.
Hmm.
And gestures, how they speak. So that's how you know. But Korean people come at you and ask, okay, what year were you born? Or they use Chinese zodiac. What Chinese zodiac are you? I'm a
Hmm.
rabbit. I'm a rabbit. And that person looks older. Oh, that's probably 12 years older than me. That kind
Got
of
it.
conversation.
Got it. By the way,
Mhm.
I want to make sure that those of you who have to hop off at the hour, I want to make sure that you are aware of this. Tomomi and I are developing an online course for those of you who are interested to dive into Korean culture at a deeper level. Um, just type in the chat box, interested, or I'm in, or send me the materials. We are still developing how that will look like, but most likely it will be a 4 hour online training. We'll do it on 2 separate days, 2 hours one day, 2 hours the next day. And just type it in the chat box. We'll follow up with you afterwards, and we would be happy to have that conversation with you, how we can dive together into the murky waters of culture that are not immediately noticeable. Safe to go to the next slide, or do you still want to talk about Confucianism?
Yes, maybe one thing, or so positions, just like I earlier mentioned, please always think about who is in what position. And Korean people, when they speak in Korean language, they usually use position name and last name. So they don't usually call people by first name.
Yep.
So that shows that they're always reminding you of where the position is.
So you're Dr. Kumai for me, and I should not be calling you Tomomi. You're Dr. Kumai.
Oh, I'm not a doctor, so I'm
Professor
just
Kumai.
I'm not, yeah, I'm not professor either, but just I'm a well, you can say we're close, so you can say just Tomomi, and you're older, I think.
Well,
I don't
thank
know.
you. Thanks for
In that
pointing
case,
that out to me. Thank you. Thank
I
you.
don't know, but
I'm so much wiser.
yeah.
Hey, Matthew from the UK is asking in hierarchy, does the blood type matter as it does in Japan?
Not so much as in Japan, but people do talk about blood types, but it's more like a kind of fun way. So it's kind of like horoscope kind
Okay,
of level.
there you go.
Yeah, Japan is more into it.
Good question, Matthew. And some of you might be asking, blood type, really? Yep, there you go.
Yes.
So can I go to the Kibun slide?
Yes.
All right.
So as we mentioned, Korea is group-oriented culture, and because hierarchy is there, if you're a lower person, then you always have to think about be loyal and respectful for the higher person. What that means is you have to make sure that you keep that person's face. That means you don't make other people feel embarrassed. So kibun is a keyword. Kibun means feelings. So when you communicate, it's really important what you say, important to think how it will affect what you say will affect the other person's feeling. So from maybe direct culture where maybe Germany is, what you say what you mean what you say, and you're just delivering the fact. So it's okay to say it directly. But in Korea, it's really important. If I say this directly, is this rude? Does this person feel they're embarrassed or like losing face? So that's something we always have to think about. So that's the part I wanted to mention.
So how do you pronounce it properly? Kibun?
Kibun.
Kibun. Okay.
Kibun.
Kibun. All right. And nunchi?
Yeah. And in order to find out who is feeling what or what am I supposed to say and reading the room, this ability is important. Nunchi. Nun means eye. So you need to read the air. Okay. In this brainstorming session, just like earlier I mentioned, okay, I think the boss, he say we're gonna brainstorm, but he likes option A or this idea. So I am gonna go for it. I'm not gonna tell that I really prefer option C. No. So that's the important ability. And Korean people will tell you, oh, you don't have nunchi. Nunchi 없다. That means you don't have this EQ.
So they will
And
tell you to
oh,
your face?
nunchi 있다.
They will tell you as a Westerner?
Some people just jokingly, like, oh, you don't have nunchi, come on, please, you're embarrassing somebody. So just like jokingly, you say that. And in Japanese, we have the same phrase. We say kuki or reading the air. But that's really important in a hierarchical, group-oriented culture. You are not saying your true opinion if it might hurt the other person.
Right. And how do I say no?
Yes. Saying no, this yes and no means usually yes means just so no is not comfortable because we feel like we're disagreeing, and we don't like disagreement, or we don't like conflict. Disagreement means conflict.
Mm-hmm.
So in some direct culture, it's welcomed, right? You can hear different opinions. But here, where we respect harmony the most, we want to agreeable. So saying no, uh, I will tell you how people are saying no in
Yeah.
a later slide. I cover it too, but
Okay.
they don't
But-
usually say no. I don't think so, but they say, ah, yes. Well, yeah. So first, some silence
Mm-hmm.
or a longer pause,
Mm-hmm.
and then some fillers like, well, yeah, or this sound, then that means no is coming.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want to directly say no, but they
Mm-hmm.
want you to come to the middle ground.
So if you have enough nunchi, then you can actually, or the ability to read the air, read the room.
Right?
You will learn how to pick up those
Yes,
nonverbal cues, how a
yes,
disagreement or how a no might have shaped in your counterpart's mind, right?
right. Yes,
So, um, well, I think this is the slide that will help you drive into
yes.
this more deeper. And I want to
Yeah,
make sure
so
that we are at 2 minutes past the hour. So those of you who have to drop off, thank you for being on. We'll see this through as fast as we can, and we will send you a recording of the full session. Thank you.
thank you. So the communication is, as I said, not the content is important, but context. So who's
Mhm,
there, and where are you in the physical place or hierarchy? So one
mhm,
example of this expert person who's American was having teleconferencing with Korean team, and he is higher and this leader is here, and teleconferencing was happening with 50 of his subordinates. And this American person wanted to make the project move faster, so he was talking about problem solving. So he
mhm,
was mentioning, okay, this is not working, that is not working. How can we do better?
mhm,
And this Korean person kept kind of cutting him off. When he was
mm.
trying to say something, he just keeps speaking and he couldn't finish his sentence. So from an American point of view, where you take turns to speak, like, what is wrong? How come he's being
So
rude to
rude.
me?
Yeah. Mhm,
But this person was older, and he had this 50 people listening to this teleconferencing, and this person is a leader. So by
mhm,
pointing out what's not working, he is losing, Korean person is losing face.
mhm.
So the important thing is not about problem solving, but keeping his face in front of the group. So
Got it.
ideally, during the teleconferencing, you just listen to what he has to report. And if you want to kind of critically comment after the meeting, you have one-on-one meeting and mention it, but not in front of
Good.
50
Good.
people.
So you need to
Mm,
know your place again. You need to know who you are in
yes.
relation to others and who are the people with the most authority and power, and that will influence how people communicate with each other.
Mm-hmm.
In in
Yes.
in in a in the interest of saving some time, Tomomi, I would like to move on to the next slide and save
Yes.
the depth of this information. And you see, we're trying to provide you with the best possible value here, and that's why
Yes.
it will be important for us to do an extended session. For those of you who want to do this, feel free to drop a line in the chat box or email us later. We're going to put together a package that will do exactly that to give you the information that you need in order to be more successful in dealing with your Korean counterparts. So you already mentioned that there is or we talked about how relationship building is an important piece of understanding who is who in the organizational and societal structure. So a lot of that is done over shared meals, right? So how do
Mhm.
you do this properly as a Westerner?
Yes. For example, there was an example of this Korean person who was working for a German company, and German delegates came from the headquarters, and they had a meeting in the morning, and the the meeting didn't end at 11:30,
Mm-hmm.
and but they planned business lunch from noon, and the Korean people prepared really, gorgeous lunch, made sure the delegates were happy. It's part of the hospitality. But German delegates said, okay, let's order sandwich and continue the
Oh.
meeting because we want to get things done.
Oh.
And Korean people were shocked
Mm.
because for Koreans, yes, meeting is important too, but getting to know each other is more important. But if you just put so much focus on the task, it seems like you are not interested in building trust relationship,
All right.
but just here for the work.
Mm-hmm.
So business lunch, coffee, dinner, of course it's nice to talk about the business too, but please talk about personal side, what
Mm-hmm.
your family, how many kids you have, what your hobby is. Then after they know who you are and they want to feel you are part of their family, and if they're not like, wow, Christian's different, he's really interested in Korea and interested in us, then they want to go extra mile for you.
Will it help me decipher the
Mm.
hierarchy during the meal? I know in some Asian cultures I can tell by who is pouring the glass for whom that
Yes.
the lower hierarchy levels pour the drink for the ones that are higher in hierarchy, and as they clink glasses, the height of the
Yes.
glass in relation to each other matters and shows as hierarchy. Is that the same in Korea?
Yes, same in
Okay.
Korea.
Okay.
And seating position matters too.
Right.
Usually lower position people sit closer to the entrance,
Mm-hmm.
and you will wait until the highest position person drink or eat.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see in the order of their sitting or their eating, or yes, when they do give the toast,
Mm-hmm.
where is the glass position? If you're higher, you hold it higher. If you're
Right.
lower, lower.
Right. And Matthew from the UK says, no relationship, no result. That's a
Oh,
very
yes.
quick and dirty Western way to describe it. And I think he's pretty much spot on. Right? If there is no relationship,
Yes.
you're not getting anything done, period. Uh,
Yes.
so you already mentioned some of this in terms of leadership. It is expressed outwardly by the titles and the credentials that somebody
Hmm.
is entering the space with, or how it's written on their business cards or in the organizational charts. What other things do we need to pay attention to as Westerners in terms of leadership in Korea?
Well, most important thing here is Koreans usually need detailed directions.
Mm-hmm.
And if you come from more American freedom culture, you say, okay, this is the project and this is the outcome I want. And it's all your decision because I know you're professional. I respect you. Whatever the way you want to do it, I trust you.
Mm-hmm.
But Korean way is this is the outcome I need, but we need to do this, 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 this. So it's kind of like from a Western point of view, it sounds like micromanaging. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of managers don't want to do that. But from Korean perspective, if you don't do that, Korean people feel, he doesn't know what he's doing. So
Right.
he cannot give clear directions.
Right.
So that's the big difference.
So that would undermine my authority if I didn't give clear step-by-step instructions. Right. Good.
Mhm.
Excellent. And working together with Korean team members, what should I know about that?
Yes. So what's important most is, yeah, it's team, but when it becomes team cannot express their own opinions. So one-on-one meeting is very important to talk outside of the meeting room or outside of the office.
Mm-hmm.
And in order for them to feel safe to tell you what they think or tell the group, team building events will be nice because Korean people love doing things together like as a family.
Mm-hmm.
And usually, traditionally, it was done over business dinner. But as the culture becoming more, internationalized and less drinking, you can do different team building events. But if the easiest way is business dinner, not too long. They don't go for second round, third round anymore. Maybe just one meal and coffee and finish.
But I have to
But
drink my soju, right? I have to. hold
Yes.
myself. Okay, good.
Yes, yes. Even if you don't drink, it's important to kind of receive, the alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
If you say, nah, no, thank you, I don't drink, like they feel like, oh. But if you explain, like, oh, I'm on medication and I can drink, but I enjoy being here and I like to get to know you, then it's okay.
So
So
it's not. Is it then seen as an offense if I receive the glass with a drink and don't drink it? Is that okay then?
yeah, it's okay if you before you receive it, you can say like, oh, I am sorry, because of my religion or because I'm
Mm-hmm.
taking medication is the
Mm-hmm.
best excuse.
Okay.
But
Okay.
if you are not, if you can take alcohol but you don't feel like drinking, you can say, oh, I'm not strong, so you can take
Mm-hmm.
just one light sip and you
Mm.
don't have to drink it. But as long as you're pouring the drink for other people and enjoying the conversation, and it's good. But a lot of times, you know direct culture people say, no, I don't drink.
Okay.
But the the point is holding the glass together and doing the toast together, and this togetherness
Mm-hmm.
is important, so you don't have to drink the whole thing or
All right. Good.
so
Good.
much.
So
Yeah.
there's no social pressure for me to do that, but um, would you? And I've had this experience a lot with people from China, that depending on where in China you go, the locals will test the Westerners and say, let's see how much he or she can eat of this. We know that Westerners are
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah, yeah.
a little bit iffy about our food, so let's see how much chicken feet they can have, and let's try the eel for them, and whatever it is in their local cuisine. Do Koreans do that similarly? That they try to test the foreigners on how much
Yes,
does the
yes.
foreigner actually hold up with us?
Yeah. Yeah, like especially like older generations or people who like drinking,
Mm,
and then they know you can drink, they want to do that, like, because how far you can go with them,
mm-hmm.
together is something they're looking for.
Okay.
And Sabine said, allergic to alcohol. That's
Mm-hmm.
perfectly fine to say that. They will welcome your honesty,
Mm-hmm.
but it's important how you say it. Oh, sorry, I don't drink, I'm allergic.
Mm-hmm.
Is not like, oh, thank you for inviting me, and I would love to, but unfortunately I'm allergic, so I will drink orange juice. But yes, come back, cheers, and you have
Mm-hmm.
fun. Then they're happy that you're
Okay.
enjoying together.
So you're saving their face. So you honor the kambun,
Yes,
right? Yeah. Okay. Good.
right.
Excellent. Great explanation. All right, then I'm going to skip a couple of the slides just to bring this
Hmm.
to a positive conclusion. I want to hear from all of our participants who are on here today and who are still on. I understand that some of you had to leave, but we still have 33 people in the room. This is great. So this tells us that Tomomi's content is relevant. Excellent. I'm so excited about this. So those of you who are currently doing business with Koreans, what are you going to do differently? What are some of the things you will not do any longer, and what are the things you want to start doing? And Lucy, I see that you raised your hand. If you have a comment, please type it in the chat box. Thank you. So type it in the chat box. What are some of the things you will start doing, or the things you will stop doing, or at least what is the biggest takeaway? What's the one thing you learned here today that's most valuable to you? Just type it in the chat box. And if you don't feel like sending it to everyone, send it only to Tomomi. That is fine as well. You don't need to be put on the spot. Matthew says he likes the micromanagement perspective deal idea. He'll do more of the granular level detail. Thanks. Excellent. Thanks, Matthew. Sabina says discuss one-on-one with my Korean students instead of in front of the group. Excellent. Thank you, Sabina. That's an important one, right, Tomomi?
Yes, and if you're teaching, and Koreans, it's really difficult, teacher and the whole group. So if you include small group activities, it's easier for students to express, because their opinion is not any longer individual opinion, but it becomes the group opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So they can freely express.
Right.
Then get back to the bigger group and share.
Right. Excellent. Well, thank you everybody for being such active participants. You see, I'm browsing across some of these slides because hey, there's more for you to learn, and we'll do that together, if you will. This is the concept that Tomomi and I have hashed out for now. We would like to offer it to those of you who want to do much more business with Korea or with people from Korea. We'll do, as I said, a 2-by-2 hour live cultural training program. This is the price point that we agreed upon. I think this is a steal, given the knowledge and the experience that Tomomi can provide. I'm already biting myself in the rear for putting the price on that. We should have. Well, it is out there now, so it is okay. So those of you who express it in the chat box that you want the details on this, you can still do that now, or email us and get in touch with us. This is how you get a hold of Tomomi and of myself. I did not put a phone number for Tomomi in there because you will wake her up in the middle of the night, and I don't want you to do that. So remember the time difference. But there is an email for both of us. So feel free to reach out to us. I will send you a recording. You will also get some more in detail answers to some of the questions you brought in the chat box that we may have not had time to address here today. Tomomi and I will go over this and just give you a quick response to that. And we will also provide you with additional details on how you can engage with us at a deeper level. Tomomi, thank you so much for staying up that late, for taking time for our friends and global family here. Any final words from you?
Well, I really enjoyed, and I'm really thankful that everybody gave me comments and questions. And so, if you have any additional questions, you can contact me. And Christian, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity and facilitating. I enjoyed discussing with you.
Oh, I always love working with you. You know that. Excellent. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Yeah, Milton, I see all your questions coming in. I'll leave the chat box open for another minute. You can drop them in, and we will address them in the follow-up email. Thank you, everybody, for staying on. Thank you for joining us today. This was the webinar on doing business with Korea, presented by Tomomi Kumai and the Culture Mastery. Thanks for being on. Look forward to seeing you on one of our future webinars, actually one coming up in 2 days on working with Italy, completely different part of the globe and different ball game. Thank you for now. Thank you, Tomomi. Get some sleep, hug your family, stay safe, stay inside if you don't need to go outside, and take care of your families and communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye, everyone.